Oh hey, look what time it is. It's time to talk about a country that enacted a complete societal rebellion. Yep, that's right, it's Scotland. I wonder what their reason is today. Well, it's religion, of course. The Bishops' War, to be exact. Let's start with Scotland's relationship with religion. Christianity was introduced by the Romans sometime in the mid-7th century. That means Scotland was Catholic for a bit. Up until the 14th century, they were still deciding if they wanted to share a church with the English. But in the 16th century, I think they finally decided on being Protestant, specifically Calvinist. Using Calvinism as a base, Scotland made their own brand of Christianity called Presbyterianism. Also, fun fact, one of the oldest standing buildings in Tallahassee is a Presbyterian church, which has been there since like 1838. I just thought that was pretty cool. Now, that brings us to the witch trials. It's 1591, King James, the current King of Scotland. He goes to Copenhagen, marries a woman from Denmark, and then sails back to Scotland. However, a terrible storm brewed and nearly discontinued the king and his new wife thing. Well, apparently, some witches made that storm. And we know this because they said so. Guyla Stockin and her coven of witches confirmed it. Okay. This act of witchcraft terrifies the king, thus beginning a series of witch trials. Following the incident, the king's men were now all about using this cool new almost science to find out who else was a witch. King James was the one who came up with said almost science. He even wrote a book about it. I guess having a spell put on you makes you an expert in the field. Well, he certainly had everyone else fooled, because under his rule, 300 witches were killed.
Your magic is weak, old man.
And for the sake of this video, let's just say that this factors into the Bishops' War. Anyway, at the time of the witch trials, there were two kings, James V of Scotland and Henry XIII of England. King James didn't like the Protestant movement until King Henry humored it, and then he thought to himself, well, I guess I'll accept it if it scares the Pope into giving me funny money. But then he died. But his only heir was Mary, the Queen of Scots. She was a baby. This is where the war of religion happens. It's the Catholic French versus the Protestant English fighting over who gets to marry a baby and control all of Scotland. Oh hey, the French won. And they are super excited to undo the new Protestant scene in Scotland for their main man, the Pope. 1546, Protestant preacher George Wishart is killed by Cardinal Beaton. Cardinal Beaton is then assassinated by some Protestants. Said Protestants seize a castle in hopes of being saved by England. But that last part doesn't happen. A bunch of them got captured, one of which was John Knox. He'll later be known as the Protestant reformer whose Reformation trademark was violence. And he wrote a Bible. But now he's in exile. And this sucks. This sucks. His big, cool religion he left behind in Scotland is surrounded by Catholics. So he fought back with misogyny. The first blast of the trumpet against the monsterous regiment of women. Well, guess what? England is Protestant again. And hey, John Knox is back. Wow, this is like the perfect recipe for kicking the French out of Scotland. And it must have been, because they did just that.
I didn't scare you with my face-to-face man-fight.
Scotland is now aligned with their bitter enemy and neighbor, the English. Things were still rough in Scotland until another King James emerged from the froth. He made sure that things were Protestant. He made Bibles cheap, so everything was great. We now enter the 17th century. This is where the Civil War happens. So let's check up on our favorite nations and see how they're doing. England only had like 5 million people and most of them were farmers. Scotland had maybe 1 million people and there was a divide halfway through the country between scary people and less scary people. By this point, Scots are commonly used as a trooper in other people's wars, and as a result, the Scots know war better than the English. I wonder if this is foreshadowing, maybe. And above all else, the Scottish Presbyterians are still very distrusting of the state. Now that we're all caught up, let's jump to 1603. Queen Elizabeth has now died, and her son Charles has taken the throne. We'll soon find that King Charles is an interesting character. He's got this idea of divine right, which is making him think that God has given him the absolute authority to rule over everything. including Parliament.
You seeing this?
And because of this, King Charles likes bishops, because they put his religious orders into effect. All the while, Calvinists are running about England. They're skeptical of the church system. That's pretty cool. Look at them go. We'll see that develop eventually. But then, bam, 1625. King James has now died. So now King Charles controls both England and Scotland. Another thing to note about King Charles, he's friends with George Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham. This fine gentleman is known for being a commoner who worked his way into nobility, and a love for sacking villages, and drinking profusely. We'll use Charles's friendship with Buckingham as the first glorious contribution to the pile of things that Charles did that no one liked. June 1625. King James VI is dead, so they have to open the first Parliament. Parliament wants the Duke of Buckingham to be impeached, but all Charles wants to do is support his sister who is losing the 30-year war. Charles doesn't get this, so he throws a hissy fit and dissolves Parliament. With Buckingham still in power, Charles keeps funding him to sack more villages and drink more alcohol. The second Parliament happens. Parliament really wants to impeach Buckingham. They also really want to discuss Charles' tariffs. But Charles pulls a soon-to-be classic move and dissolves Parliament. Again. Anyway, our royal protagonist is currently on a streak of violating people's rights for money, so Parliament proposes a petition to get him to stop. And it works. For now. Your subjects should have inherited this fuck it. Meanwhile, here goes Buckingham to start a war with France.
Fuel for killing tiny cowards.
In August of 1628, he dies. Charles now calls the third Parliament because he still needs money. Although he agreed to the petition of right, he already took money on imports. Now Parliament wants to approve his and he has dissolved Parliament again. Cool. This man has now dismissed Parliament 3 times in the course of 4 years. Another fine addition to the things that Charles did that no one liked. It was at this point that some of the Puritans were so fed up with Charles' antics that they just left. They ended up founding something called North America later down the line. I don't know what that is, but I'll look more into it later. After several failed attempts to even remain in the presence of Parliament for more than 5 minutes, Charles decided he'd just go without them for 11 years. Easy. He would just have to find other ways to generate revenue. So Charles put on his gloves and entered the political crypts to begin brewing up some make-money-fast schemes in his political cauldron. And from the bubbling stew arose ship money. 'Twas an old law he found, abandoned and ripe for exploitation. It was a tax, not under the jurisdiction of Parliament, that called all responsible for warships to pay the equivalent cost unless new ships were built. But basically, Charles just kept calling a state of emergency so he could steal money from shipbuilders each year. He also found a loophole in knighthood that just so happened to take money from unsuspecting Englishmen. It essentially taxed people who earned enough money to be considered for knighthood, except Charles took their money without considering them for knighthood. Finally, he used some old law about wardships to just tax minorities or something. Just more things to add to the pile. Well, I guess it's now appropriate to mention Charles' stance on religion. To no one's surprise, he wants all of the land that he possesses to be unified under the Anglican Church. Both him and this guy named William Laud are on the same page. Laud is the founder of laudianism, an offshoot of Arminianism, which is basically being a really fancy Puritan. And if you still don't understand, I've created the following visual representation. With this in mind, you can probably imagine that Laud and Calvinists are bitter enemies. Laud was also the pioneer of cool new techniques for telling everyone that your religion is the best. This did not reflect well on Laud, nor did it on Charles. I'm going to make an executive decision and qualify that as something Charles did that no one liked. Remember how this was supposed to be about Scotland? July 23rd, 1637. Charles takes a look at his prayer book. He likes his prayer book a lot, and in his hubris he thought to himself, "Hey, Scotland would like this too." So by some freak act of nature, some copies of his favorite book ended up in Scotland. But when the dean of St. Charles Cathedral decided to read from the English prayer book instead of John Knox's prayer book, I don't think they liked it very much. So they politely asked the dean to leave. King Charles saw this, and he was sad that they didn't like his book. Now it is November 1637, where something called the Tables happens. There's a guy there named John Hampden, and he basically takes away Charles's ship money. This would make it really hard for Charles to fund a religious war, if he were to do one. Come winter, some Scots got together and organized a covenant against the English. We'll call them the Covenanters. King Charles's treasurer, the Earl of Turquire, saw the magnitude of the Scottish unification and told Charles, "Yeah, you're gonna need like 4,000 soldiers for this, lol." As a joke, of course. "Oh, cool. Give me like 2 weeks tops," the king replied. But Charles can't do this, because it's logically improbable. And also a joke. The Covenant prepared for exactly this response from the king, saying, "You can read this." This response was cute. Charles hated it. And by extension, so did his bishops. One even said, "For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft." So Charles sends another Scottish lord named Hamilton to do what Lord Turquire could not. That is to say, convince the Scottish to calm down and read Charles's cool book. The Marquis of Hamilton was an interesting choice at best. Upon arriving in Scotland, he realized quickly that bribery would not work. So what then could he do to get the Covenanters to listen to him? Oh, he could hold the Glasgow Assembly. November 1638, the Scots state their demands, and Hamilton, pretending like he can actually comprehend spoken language, immediately denies them, only to then take a play from the King Charles Book of Techniques and dismiss the assembly. But the Scots did not leave. In vain did the moderator remind him that the assembly had been called by the king and constituted according to the ancient order in Scotland. And so, this was the turning point of it all. The Scots wanted the English to know that they controlled Scotland. But to enforce this idea, the Scots would need an all-star team. Oh hey look, the team just showed up.
Oh, it was a push, not a pull.
Archibald Campbell, the Earl of Argyll and the richest man in Scotland, came out and said,
"You gentlemen need a leader."
In addition to him, there was Alexander Leslie, experienced mercenary, low-born, highly successful soldier. He would be the one that would turn this militia into an army. Meanwhile, on the English side, Charles's plan was coming up short. His call to action held less power than he'd expected.
Mythable.
What you looking at there?
Looking for kings.
I'm pretty sure this is looking for formidable soldiers and for them to apply below.
Apply a bellow? Looking.
I mean, looking for soldiers.
Nah.
Oh, I can't believe you're gonna hate me like that, you know. And good old
Why do you sound
Gina
like
here.
that?
Because I'm Gina. Everybody knows me in this town.
Oh, God, I hope the soldiers get rid of you first.
They're not gonna get rid of me. Everybody loves me in this town. I buy at all the shops. I talk to all the people. You know how it is.
I've never seen you a day in my life. Who the hell are you? Please stop talking. I beg of you, just stop trying to read.
Oh,
King
but my
is
voice is
I said stop.
soothing. My voice is
I said-
soothing like a flowing river. Oh man, not again. This is like the 5th time this week. I guess I'm headed home.
Things were not looking so good for the English. This might come as a surprise, but many of the British folk were apathetic towards the situation. No one was really eager to throw their lives away in Scotland. If I didn't know better, I'd think King Charles was the only one that still cared. Probably because he is. So, he arranged a battle plan. 20,000 Englishmen would take the Covenanters head on, whilst 5,000 flanked by the sea. Jesus Christ. Now Charlie Boy and his glorious army are preparing to fight. The Scots. April 1638. Hamilton from the sea tries to flank Aberdeen Highlands stronghold. That plan fails, and 2 of his generals are arrested. But that's okay, because he's got a second chance. May 1638. Hamilton tries to invade the Firth of Forth. Oh, having a little trouble there. Oh, and he got it. His mom was there, and she was packing heat.
Now be bringing your British army over here.
And so, Hamilton enters a state of depression, located conveniently a few miles downstream. Well, that's 2 out of 3 battle plans completely foiled. All the while, Charles' main army is still going to do his big land invasion, fully unaware that Hamilton has failed him. Twice. Time passes, I forget what happens in between, and the armies finally meet. Charles gives up. Yay! Covenanters win! 1939, the Covenanter Parliament implemented all kinds of religious laws to undo what the English did. Now Argyll is solidifying his grip on the movement, using lawsuits. But both sides began preparing their military once again, because they still hate each other. Charles starts looking for a new way to raise money.
Ding dong!
Oh hey! Charles got the Parliament to agree to give him money for the war and he dissolved Parliament again. For the 4th time. Charles then went to Taquire, pissing and crying about his humiliation at the last Parliament. He begged Taquire not to go to the Covenant Parliament. So when June 1640 rolled around, Taquire did not show up. But do you know who does? Argyll. With his presence, they discuss all kinds of things that Charles would hate, such as plans to invade England. Argyll's role as leader of the Covenanters is now fully cemented, for better or for worse. The only anti-Covenanters left in Scotland are the Ogilvy family. Well, Argyll sacks them before I can even remember what makes them worth mentioning. Now we enter the barracks as Scotland prepares to invade England. The soldiers were trained with strict orders for no ransacking, no pillaging, and no naughty stuff. This was actually a really smart move. Also, this level of discipline makes the Scottish army even more terrifying, so add that to the Scotland is scariometer. The English made preparations too, doing so by hiring criminals and letting said criminals embezzle money from the military. So basically they're doing just peachy. Alright, so the lineup. We have about 7,000 cut-ups versus 20,000 angry Scots. Let's see what happens. August 28th, 1640. Covenanters win the Battle of Newburn, presumably in Newburn. Then the Scots took over other things too. A lot of other things. Like all of northern England, kind of a lot of things. Hey, what do you know? Scotland won a major political victory. Fine, Charles said. I'll submit. So they make the Treaty of Ripon on October 28th, 1640. Now Charles is really broke. So at the end of his power, what does Charles decide to do? He does what any other reasonable person would. Attempt a kidnapping. And that's about the end of the Bishop's War. I wrote some stuff down about the killing times, but I don't feel like I should make this video any longer. All I'll say is this. The much anticipated sequel to King Charles does what any good sequel will do. Reuse all the same bits. He tried to go back on the terms of the Oath of the Covenant that the other Charles begrudgingly made. After that, killing followed. And that's about all I could be bothered to find out. To put a bow on this video, I got my Scottish friend to come and give me some cool Scotland facts. Here they are. That was cool. Bye.
I
I am in here.
it's me because my camera's still stuck in the ground. Hold on. Oh, it's still stuck. Oh.
Get out of the way.
Do you have a permit to drive this vehicle?
I can't even.
May I see your identity? Some method of identification, please. Sir? Hello? Can you hear me?
I can't keep a straight face when you're making voices. Oh. Get him.
That vehicle has 4 wheels. You need a permit for that.
Just go now. Flawless. What the hell happened?
Like barely. Oh, we just.
Yep. I might do it. Does that work? Stuck.
Oh yeah, I forgot I died, so I had the fizz gun. I take it another time. It's a bit hard because when I do run by him, I bump into him like that.
And then I scorpion kicked him in the nuts.
Should I pull him more, or is that good?
No, I think that's actually good.
Oh.
It don't matter. None of this matters.